Stick or sack David Moyes? This is very interesting for me. This is a huge debate I think that is going to come across West Ham in the summer. It looks as if David Moyes is going to stay on as the West Ham manager since his monumentous win in Prague, leading West Ham to European glory. Do I agree with this? It's been no secret that all season myself and a lot of West Ham fans have criticised him and weren't exactly happy with the decisions he's making. And, that is still going to remain, I think, when he potentially stays on as new manager. But in terms of whether we should stick with him or sack him, I really think we should stick with him. And I know people are going to be saying, you've contradicted yourself. And, what were you saying early in the season that you should get rid of him? Yes, I agree. Was I proved wrong? Maybe a little bit. Would another manager have given us European glory? Would another manager have kept us up? No idea. Would Sean Dyche, who I probably wanted to be appointed when Moyes was in a bit of a rut, have been a better appointment than Moyes, considering what he's done? Probably not. So I was probably wrong on that front. But would Brendan Rodgers have done better than Moyes? Potentially. Would Graham Potter have done better than Moyes? Potentially. It's all a what ifs. But in terms of the scope of what David Moyes has achieved, the spirit of the team. I mean, you look at those videos and I criticised him earlier in the year for losing the dressing room, but it doesn't seem like he's lost the dressing room. I don't know. Is it the occasion that they're celebrating, or they put aside the sort of differences of the manager and all this other stuff, or is it just that you've got a really together, brilliant team that have finally found their kind of flow? And it turns out that they were behind David Moyes all along, and they were wanted to play for him, and not a single player there wants him to lose his job. I'm not sure. For me, I kind of feel like maybe it's the occasion. But you look at the togetherness of the squads in the the post-match scenes, the videos on social media. I mean, they're literally singing about Jarrod Bowen shagging his missus. This is a team that buys into it all, and they sing every song with all their heart. So the team seems behind David Moyes. The owner seems behind David Moyes, and he has been all season. Whether that was the right decision or not, I mean, I guess you would argue, of course, yes, because he's given us a European trophy and he's kept us up. Would another manager have done that again? We don't know. But for all we can see, it was the right decision. And I think it'll be almost foolish to not give him at least the start of next season. The only issue for me is there a glass ceiling with Moyes? Again, that's a bit contradictory because he's given us European football 3 years in a row. He's kept us up for 3 seasons when it looked like we might get relegated. I mean, this season you can't really say he kept us up. It's kind of an excuse. He basically buried us at the start of the year with his tactics and maybe with his signings. And then the team has made a comeback. So I wouldn't say he's saved us this season. He's kind of undug his own hole, if that makes any sense. The first 2 seasons, obviously, he came in midway through the season and saved us, which I think is very commendable. But is there a glass ceiling with Moyes? The only thing I've seen from this season is he tends to change his tactics too often. He wanted to be a more possession-based side, and that doesn't really work for us. He wanted to go to a back 3, and while that sort of excited me a little bit, I think that doesn't really suit the team. Now that we've got our kind of formation of a 4-2-3-1, is he going to build on that? Is he going to make some decent signings this summer? I know Newman has lost his job, and Noble looks like he's going to step down as director of football. So again, it's going to be a summer with a big transition. Do we want to add a manager to that? Do we want a whole new backroom staff? Do we want to have a whole new sort of fresh scope? I don't know if we do. I think sticking with David Moyes, like they say, it's better the devil you know than the devil you don't. Sticking with David Moyes, he knows the players. And I think they've, towards the back end of the season at least, they've hit a good bit of momentum, started playing some decent football. Do I trust David Moyes to find a decent Declan Rice replacement? Honestly, yes. I think he's bought quite well since he's been at the club. There's not very many players you can say he's bought that haven't really worked out. Obviously, Haller was a Pellegrini buy, so you can't really blame him for that. Scamacca was a bit of a question mark for me. I think he's a brilliant player, and I'd love him to stay on the summer. Does he suit David Moyes' system? Well, according to Antonio, he doesn't, but I would argue no. Whether he can adapt him to that system, I'm not entirely sure. Danny Ings, I think, is maybe a questionable signing, especially on the wages he's on. But, Kurt Zuma, Areola, Soufal, Emerson, Paqueta, Jarrod Bowen, of course, Thomas Souček. I think these are all brilliant signings. So, I do trust for the money to be in Declan Rice, for the Declan Rice money to be in David Moyes' hands, and dare I say, he could be the guy to convince him to stay at least one more season. I know Sullivan has come out and basically said that Declan Rice is going to leave, but he's alluded to the fact it's the player's choice. And of course, I will be going into this in another video, into the whole Declan Rice saga. But ultimately, it is sort of up to the players whether he wants to leave or not. They seem really tight, Declan Rice and David Moyes. If we were to sack David Moyes, which I think my sentiment has always been, let's not just sack him for no reason. You saw Southampton sack Hasenhüttl and they never replaced him with anyone decent. Leicester sacked Rodgers and they got Dean Smith in. Plenty of clubs have decided to sack their manager and not stick with him and have sort of felt the consequences of that. So my sentiment has always been, if we're going to sack Moyes, we need to get him someone better. Who's better on the market right now? I'm still a believer in Graham Potter. I don't know whether that's the best appointment, but I'm still a believer in Graham Potter. I think if we were going to sack Moyes and give someone else the job, I think we should sign Graham Potter. Is there anyone else? Not really. I'm not a big fan of Rodgers, I'll be honest. I feel like, he's a good manager and what he achieved at Leicester was good, but I would honestly rather just stick with David Moyes than take a punt on Rodgers. I think at least with Potter, you're taking a punt on him because he's this young, exciting manager who could be, very, sort of come up with his own new style. Rodgers seems like we're just recycling another manager. He's not going to come up with anything too new. He's not going to, blow anyone socks off. I think having a young, energetic manager like Graham Potter would be really, really cool, would be really good. And I feel like he'd be an investment, but also he would be a risk, he'd be a risk. The only risk for me, though, is if we don't invest in him now, how long do you give David Moyes next season? Because if he starts off the season poorly, do we say, right, well, you're going to turn it around because you did last season? Or do we say, well, you kind of had last season, yet turn it around then, but you also had a crap start to the season. Do we keep risking it and given, we should be good all season round? We shouldn't need you to take half a season to turn it around. That is my only worry with Moyes is, if we decide to give him the start of the season, we then get the whole, oh, well, he's built up all this credit in the bank. He's won a European trophy. When should we sack him? And if we're playing poorly, how much time do we give him? So I feel like maybe having a manager with a clean slate would be good. I also feel like Celtic would be a big pull for him. It seems like a good time for him to go if he could get the Celtic job and we can get someone in like Graham Potter. Honestly, Potter's my only kind of manager. I don't know if you guys have any suggestions for managers, but right now there's not too many managers out there that I would bite your hand off for. If he finished off this season, maybe 16th or 17th, and we didn't win the European Cup, or the Conference League, I would maybe be like, oh, let's get Rodgers in because clearly Moyes is out of his depth. There's no real manager for me that I'm excited to bring in. Poch has gone to Chelsea. The Spurs have got their new manager now. There's not too many managers out there that really excite me apart from Graham Potter. I know people have sort of questioned that, but I really do think I could buy into the Potter project. However, I do think we should stick with David Moyes. I really do. And I never thought I'd be saying this at the end of this season. I really thought I'd be adamant for David Moyes to leave. But I think it's the right decision. I think he clearly seems like he's not done at West Ham. Although, he's won his European Cup. I kind of think to myself, what more can you do at West Ham? I don't really see him winning the Europa League with West Ham. I don't see him getting this into a Champions League spot with the competition from Newcastle and now Brighton. Potentially Brentford, if they strengthen, could be a big competition for that. You'll have Chelsea back this year, I would imagine. Spurs as well. I mean, bearing in mind Spurs and Chelsea were not at the races this year, both of which did not qualify for Europe. It's going to be very competitive next year for Europe. Aston Villa have now ended the race as well under Unai Emery. I'd love Unai Emery at West Ham, but obviously he's got a good project going at Villa, and I don't think he'd ever leave Villa right now, at least. So, can David Moyes really take us to that next level? I'm not sure. Is he, now he's achieved his first cup, after 25 years, has he really got that much more to give, that much of a yearn? You can imagine him this season, he'd be desperate to win that cup, putting his medal around his dad's neck, giving him that medal, showing him, when I leave my career, this is what I've got. I've got a Conference League medal. I've taken West Ham and I've won them the European Trophy first time in 49 years. Now that he's done that in his career, is he really going to be sitting there desperate to improve and desperate to get the best out of his players? I'm not so sure. Do you want to maybe invest in a hungry young coach like Graham Potter, who has got a lot to prove, who has got to admit that he's not a Nuno Espirito Santo, who was just good at a small club and he's just going to suffer. Another manager potentially Marco Silva. I'm not 100% on him, but he would be someone that you could potentially take a punt on. I'm not entirely sure if he'd be the best person for the job, but I'd be interested to see him. And Vincent Kompany as well would interest me, but I don't think he'd leave Burnley. But overall, I think we should stick with David Moyes. I think he's earned it. I'm not 100% convinced by it, but I think if that's the board's decision, I think it's probably the best decision. I trust him to reinvest the Rice money, especially the links that we're looking at the moment with different players. I think it looks like we're going to be quite smart with the money, and who knows, maybe David Moyes could be the man to convince him. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Should we stick or sack David Moyes? Who would you get instead? Do you think Potter's a good shout? Marco Silva's a good shout? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next.